A word after a word after a word is power. Margaret Atwood.
The mouse always understands the elephant. African fable.
Volunteer?
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. United States Constitution.
That's right. Yep. Here, here.
Oh, how I loved everybody else when I finally got to talk so much about myself. Williams.
I know some people like that. It is my great pleasure and honor to introduce us to Betsy Carswell. She has been a maverick in building the Golden Crown Literary Society, a nonprofit dedicated to increasing the visibility of sapphic literature. She grew up in a Navy family on the coast of the United States, living in Virginia, Hawaii, California, South Carolina, Florida, and Maryland, before finding a home in Washington, D.C. She retired from federal service in 2017 after a 32-year career in the intelligence community, where she served as a cartographer, geospatial analyst, and senior manager. Her academic background includes a BA in geography and religion, an MS in pastoral counseling, postgraduate work in geospatial intelligence, and a graduate certificate in conflict resolution and negotiation. She lives on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. with Carol, a wife of 13 years. Welcome, Betsy. Thank you again for being here.
A word after a word after a word is power. These are the words of Canadian novelist and poet Margaret Atwood, who is probably best known for her often challenged and banned futuristic dystopian novel, The Handmaid's Tale. Literature has the power to shape our understanding of ourselves, other people, the world around us, building empathy in the process. Over the last few years, a record number of books have faced censorship and removal from libraries nationwide, with those featuring LGBTQ+ individuals and people of color being the primary targets, as Lujara mentioned in her introduction. Why is this happening, and what can we do about it? Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me this afternoon. My name's Betsy Carswell, and I'm speaking with you today about the importance and the power of literature. I'm going to confess something I probably shouldn't. I'm not an expert in literature. I am a reader, and through a series of unexpected events, find myself leading a literary society, more because of my managerial experience than my literary credentials. But I am a reader of all genres, and I believe deeply in the power of the written word. My area of interest, developed over the last few years, specifically focuses on sapphic literature, literature for women loving women, lesbians, and sapphically aligned trans and non-binary people. While many of my examples will come from this world, the experience is likely similar for all folks whose work has been underrepresented in publishing and is under active attack from those who would like to silence our stories. I'm the board president of the nonprofit Golden Crown Literary Society, the leading literary organization for writers, editors, publishers, narrators, readers, and friends who celebrate sapphic literature. We dedicate ourselves to enhancing the diversity, accessibility, quality, and visibility of sapphic literature. GCLS is fully inclusive of all identities, including trans and non-binary people, in the sapphic literary space. GCLS lives our mission to support sapphic literature through our Writing Academy for folks who want to develop their writing skills through our 3-year-long educational tracks. We offer a full suite of awards recognizing excellence in sapphic literature. If you're looking for a good sapphic read, our Goldie winners are an excellent place to start. If you write sapphic lit, nominate your books for the Goldies. We have prize money totaling $46,000 a year, with individual authors winning between $1,000 and $15,000 across 19 genre categories and popular choice awards. We also hold an in-person annual conference each year in a different city, and this July we'll be gathering in Albany, New York, and we would love to see you there. You can learn more about all of this at our website, goldencrownliterary.org. Thank you to Brooklyn Ethical for your kind invitation to speak, particularly Vandra Thorburn for conveying the invitation, and to Lajira Cooper for thinking of me after meeting at a GCLS event in Jersey City a couple of years ago. I truly appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of you today. When I sat down to develop this speech, I looked at your website to learn a little bit more about you. Your homepage drew me in with the wonderfully inclusive group photo of folks that span so many dimensions of diversity, some visible and I'm sure some not visible. In a world that wants to divide and even erase us, it's heartening to see a group that is drawing people together across generations and life experience to a community of shared values. What is literature? A word after a word after a word is power. It's important to start with a definition of what I mean when I speak of literature. I looked up the dictionary definition to get started. The Oxford Dictionary defines literature as written works, especially those considered of superior quality or lasting artistic merit. I'll come back to that in a moment. My personal conception of literature is really broad and includes poetry, fiction, nonfiction, graphic novels, audiobooks, drama, and even music. For me, literature is stories and narratives that share experience to connect us, that expand our hearts and minds, and that convey essential truth. Works that increase our imagination and creativity, that help us develop empathy and understanding. Literature has the power to move us individually and collectively. Literature has the power to change the world, and it has. I suppose I have some limits. I would probably exclude 280 character social media posts. However, a story's length does not define its power. There's a famous 6-word story popularly misattributed to Ernest Hemingway. Does anyone know the story? I see some hands going up. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. 6 words that can move us to heartbreak. This micro story shows us that the power of literature comes in the interplay between the words of the author and the consciousness of the reader. Unspoken words hold the power of this story. Why were these baby shoes never worn? Do these shoes represent a life cut short, or dreams that were never realized? So, back to our definition of literature. When the dictionary tells us that literature is written works, especially those considered of superior quality or lasting artistic merit, I wonder who's making that determination. Who decides what counts as quality or merit? Do works count as literature only if there's consensus on their value? There are books, songs, and other literary works that speak directly to me that might not to you. And I'm sure there are things that speak to you that don't speak to me. So I support a very broad definition of literature and literary art that doesn't exclude based on perceived quality or value. Because as those who enjoy these works, we can decide whether they bring value to us. A quick word about accessibility. With the advent and proliferation of audiobooks, you don't have to read the words on the page, a development that increases accessibility for folks with vision impairment and language-based learning disabilities, or long commutes. allowing for more people the opportunity to enjoy and learn from literature. Let's talk about romance. Demand for romance novels in the United States is booming. There are brick and mortar bookstores that specialize in selling romance novels. And there's so many subgenres to explore: historical romance, paranormal, suspense, science fiction, and so much more. People sometimes scoff at the popularity of romance novels, seeing them as lesser than more serious novels and work. I suspect part of the reason for this diminution of romance is that it's seen as created by and for women, which it probably is to a large degree. Remember what I said about who gets to decide what literature has value? Let me speak from the LGBTQ perspective. Our love stories are vitally important. They are life-saving to those who need to know that the simple act of falling in love is possible, let alone worth sharing and celebrating. Telling those stories remains a revolutionary and political act. The Well of Loneliness by British author Radcliffe Hall was published in 1928. It tells the story of Stephen Gordon, an upper-class Englishwoman whose homosexuality was clear from an early age. This book radically argued that homosexuality is natural, pleading, "Give us also the right to our existence." I'm not going to recommend you go out and read The Well of Loneliness. There's been a lot of discourse about it through modern context, and it hasn't aged particularly well, but it was a groundbreaking novel at the time. I will, however, shock your sensibilities by reading the entire graphic consummation scene. And that night, they were not divided. That is as racy as this scandalous book gets. Still, because it argued that gay people have a right to exist, there were campaigns to ban the book in both England and the United States. In the mid-20th century, pulp novels became popular. Pulp refers to the inexpensive wood pulp paper on which these books were published. There were pulp westerns, romances, and detective fiction. Another pulp genre that emerged were lesbian pulp novels, which, while rather sensational, provided a window into understanding lesbian and sapphic culture, including for lesbians themselves. Culture is socially constructed through human interaction. Lesbian culture was constructed in part through the reading of lesbian literature that both influenced and was influenced by that literature. These lesbian pulps often ended with tragedy, usually insanity or suicide, because there had to be a consequence to social deviations from the norm. There were some exceptions. Anne Bannon published 6 novels between 1957 and 1962, a series known as the Beebo Brinker Chronicles. Her novels ended happily, which changed the social perception of lesbianism. She is a trailblazer in the truest sense of the word. In 2005, my organization, the Golden Crown Literary Society, recognized Anne Bannon as the very first GCLS trailblazer in recognition of her contributions to lesbian and sapphic literature. Her novels provided hope that lesbians could live a life with community and love. This country has a history of deciding whose love is worthy of existing and being legally recognized. For some Americans, the right to marry the person we choose has become legal relatively recently. In 1967, the Supreme Court decision in Loving v. Virginia struck down laws banning interracial marriage. And the 2015 Obergefell v. Hodges decision established the federal right to marriage equality for same-sex couples. We are learning that a Supreme Court decision and precedent do not mean we will keep those rights perpetually. In 2022, Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Supreme Court decision overturned Roe v. Wade, ending the constitutional right to abortion. In his Dobbs opinion, Justice Clarence Thomas suggested that both Loving and Obergefell could be overturned on similar grounds. So, I reiterate, love stories are critically important, particularly for those whose love lacks universal celebration. These stories are life-saving to those who need to know the simple act of falling in love is possible. It provides an opportunity for the world to see, like so many t-shirts and memes declare, love is love. Telling stories of love between underrepresented people remains a revolutionary and political act because we all have the right to our existence. Why is literature important? There's a proverb that states, "The mouse always understands the elephant." This saying highlights that those in less powerful positions often have a better understanding of the dominant group's actions, behaviors, and systems than the other way around. The mouse has to understand the elephant, lest they become trampled by the sheer size and dominance of the larger beast. The elephant is often unaware of the mouse's existence or perspective and may not understand or even care about the nuances of the mouse's world or the impact it has on the mouse. Historically, underrepresented groups must know about the majority group, such as how they think, behave, punish, reward, include, and exclude. I would argue that it is the mature and secure elephant who is open to learning more about the mouse. When I was in high school, way back in the 1980s, our teachers assigned us literature almost exclusively from the perspective of white men, the classics. We read important books like Thomas Hardy's Far from the Madding Crowd about the harsh realities of a farming community in Victorian England, John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath about a tenant farming family from their driven from their Oklahoma farm by devastating drought, and J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye, which was purported to share the universal experience of teen angst and alienation. Good books all. But none spoke to me as a painfully shy girl who didn't know much about herself, and none was from a woman's point of view. There is nothing wrong with reading elephant tales, but they should not be the only perspective offered. In the years since I was in school, we have seen a broadening of perspectives taught in schools, books with protagonists who are more diverse in terms of gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and other dimensions of diversity, an advancement in education that is increasingly important as students move into an increasingly diverse world. The American history taught in schools has also evolved, providing a more honest reflection of how we were formed as a nation and the contributions of people beyond the wealthy landed class who have been deemed our founding fathers, establishing a free nation even as most of them owned human beings. It's essential that we understand that disconnect between ideals and reality for us to truly live into the promises of our imperfect yet aspirational nation. Understanding ourselves. When I was a freshman in college, I took a course called Death and Dying in Western Religious Tradition. I was a pretty serious freshman. The professor said that our mortality was essential to art and the creative process. He posited that if we were immortal or lived forever, there would be no art because eventually we would experience everything and not need to interpret life through creative process. Because we are mortal, we can increase our understanding by creating our own art and by appreciating the art others create. When we consider one perspective to be baseline or normal, we all learn to see ourselves in relation to that. It isn't until we hear our own stories that we have room for different perspectives. One of my favorite singer-songwriters is Dar Williams. She has this great song about going to therapy called "What Do You Hear in These Sounds?" And there's one section that has always stuck with me. And when I talk about therapy, I know what people think. It only makes you selfish and in love with your shrink. But oh, how I loved everybody else when I finally got to talk so much about myself. There is power in seeing yourself on the page or in the lyric of a song. Has everyone had that experience? Who here has made a mixtape to share with someone so they can let them know what's in your heart and mind? When you connect with the inner life of a character, you can finally feel you're not alone. There's nothing quite like that first experience of validation and empowerment that allows you to fully embrace who you are and opens a space for you to explore more perspectives. Understanding others. The key to a strong community is openness to the perspective of other people. In her memoir, Dorothy Allison writes, 2 or 3 things I know for sure, and one of them is that telling the story all the way through is an act of love. This isn't only about underrepresented folks being able to see themselves. The overrepresented get to see us too. One should not view this as a hardship, but as a privilege. It is a privilege to get to know the fullness of each of us. Walking through the world with empathy shows you can see beyond your own experience. We are living through a dehumanizing time, a time when people in power find it in their best interest to divide us into groups that pit us against one another. We've learned that big concepts like democracy, freedom, inclusion don't resonate as fully as stories of impact. Sometimes the specificity of a story touches us more than the sweeping narratives about values and concepts. Stories are powerful humanizers, adding flesh and emotion to larger concepts. I read a piece in the paper recently about making health decisions. The piece explained that we're awash in data about just about everything. We don't really need more facts and charts to help us. We need teachers and storytellers. We need guides, not lectures, that help explain complex topics in a way that makes sense. We need straight answers, even if, or especially if, information is ambiguous or unclear. And we need empathy because health decisions are intensely personal. I found it fascinating that rather than raw scientific facts and figures, we need empathetic storytelling to support informed health decisions. Stories are essential to moving our hearts and our minds. They allow us to explore different perspectives, experiences, and cultures, to see the world through another lens, to enter the inner world of another human being, and to deepen empathy by allowing us to see how different people move through the world. So, we've established that literature is amazing and important, and more diverse literature is even more amazing and important because it helps us grow individually and communally. So if it's so obvious, why do we feel the need to defend it? What are the risks to access to literature? The First Amendment of the United States Constitution states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. The First Amendment is the source of so many of our freedoms, including the right to free speech. This amendment is the bulwark protecting our democracy and freedom to read, and freedom to read is essential to our democracy. And private groups and public authorities across the country are working to limit access to books, especially LGBTQ books and books about race and racism, usually couched as protecting children or upholding certain values and religious viewpoints. Book bans are on the rise in the United States, fueled by reactionary backlash against discussions of race, LGBTQ+ issues, and diversity teaching in public schools. Most bans are at the local level. However, challenges often come from outside the local community. In 2023, the Washington Post reviewed 1,000 school book challenges, and what they found was shocking. The Post found that most school book challenges from across the country were filed by just 11 people. The Post reported that together, these serial filers made up 6% of all book challengers, but were responsible for 60% of all filings. The Post analysis concluded that book challengers object most to sexual and LGBTQ plus content. Books about race and racism are the second biggest focus. And half of the challenged books stay on the shelf, but LGBTQ books are the most likely to be removed. History books, especially Black history, are also being banned across the nation. This isn't new. Over the past several years, we've seen attacks on critical race theory, a phrase misused and weaponized to include anything that explores our history honestly and might make some elephant folks uncomfortable. School systems and libraries across the country have removed books from the shelves, excluding the voices and contributions of African Americans and the challenges they overcame despite the systemic racism Black people have faced since first arriving in this country. We've talked about the power of literature to show us that we all have a right to our own existence, to live the life we choose with integrity and authenticity, and to increase understanding and empathy for people different from ourselves. A byproduct of this is that society changes. This also raises expectations of greater equity and inclusion. We see more people of color and women in leadership positions. The workplace becomes more diverse and inclusive. Our stories, told in books, movies, and television, become more diverse with more perspectives shared. And then the backlash comes. The dominant culture may view more perspectives as a threat to their position and supremacy. The elephants are threatened by a world with more powerful mice. On January 20th, 2025, President Trump signed an executive order entitled Ending Radical and Wasteful Government DEI Programs and Preferencing. And on March 27th, he signed an executive order entitled Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History. These orders mandate removal of all things diversity, equity, and inclusion, and require American history be rewritten in government documents and websites to eliminate divisive narratives. The New York Times recently published a list of almost 200 words that are being scrubbed across government. Words like inclusion, gender, minority, pollution, trauma, anti-racist, disability, equality, trans, victim, Black, but not white, female and women, but not male and men. This is more than censorship, as removing these words also removes funding for programs that address things like human trafficking, gender-based violence, environmental quality, and mental health. Some of the efforts to censor words are ridiculous in their wrongheadedness, like removing Hiroshima bomber aircraft name Enola Gay from websites and data repositories because of the triggering word gay. The pilot named the plane for his mother, Enola Gay Tibbetts. But some of the historical rewriting is about erasing people from history. In February, the National Park Service website that explores the history and significance of the Stonewall Uprising was stripped of any reference to transgender people. Transgender activists played a central role in this uprising that sparked the modern LGBTQ civil rights movement. This intentional omission further marginalizes trans people, a population facing extreme political, cultural, and governmental discrimination. In 2022, the United States Mint started issuing a series of 20 quarters honoring notable women in U.S. history, commemorating the centennial of women's suffrage through the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. Has anybody found any of these in the wild? These quarters recognize accomplishments across diverse fields like suffrage, civil rights, abolition, science, and the arts. Several honorees used their words to fight for social change. Dr. Maya Angelou, Eleanor Roosevelt, Ida B. Wells, Zakala Shah, Edith Kanaka Ole, and Reverend Dr. Pauli Murray. One 2025 honoree is astronomer Dr. Vera Rubin. Dr. Rubin's work helped prove the existence of dark matter in the cosmos, shifting the way scientists study the universe since the 1970s. She also advocated for women in science, having overcome several obstacles throughout her career in a male-dominated field. In late January, editors of the National Science Foundation's website removed her advocacy for women in science from her biography. It still included her scientific contributions, but her groundbreaking work in bringing more women into science was censored. The National Park Service has also changed the website that commemorates the Underground Railroad, removing a photo of Harriet Tubman and replacing the text that read, "The Underground Railroad refers to the efforts of enslaved African Americans to gain their freedom by escaping bondage. Wherever slavery existed, there were efforts to escape." And they replaced this language with, "The Underground Railroad bridged the divides of race, religion, sectional differences, and nationality, and joined the American ideals of liberty and freedom expressed in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution to the extraordinary actions of ordinary men and women working in a common purpose to free a people." What? This sounds more like Hands Across America and an organized network of secret routes and safe houses used by freedom seekers to escape enslavement in the southern states. The new narrative erased Harriet Tubman and the primacy of African American self-determination in the Underground Railroad. James Baldwin tells us, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." We cannot address iniquity if we don't face that iniquity exists. Erasing the diverse history of the United States, even if the order to do it is displayed in a fancy black folder and signed in a black Sharpie, does not make us stronger. It diminishes the work so many have done to make us a more perfect union by including the voices and perspectives of all people. So, what can we do about it? We have to move those who are movable. These exclusionary and divisive policies are intentionally cruel, intended to hurt certain groups of people with an ever-growing population experiencing pain, even those who support the current administration. When we tell folks "we told you so" or FAFO, we are engaging in the same cruel process. We haven't changed the process, just the target. We may feel justified in the moment, but it's a losing strategy. We have to connect with one another and empathize with the impact of what's happening. So what can you do? Stay informed of what's happening in your local community, public libraries and schools. If we see attempts to ban books and diverse perspectives, we need to lean into our freedom of speech and advocate for freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and access to diverse literature for all. Join community groups like Brooklyn Ethical or the Golden Crown Literary Society that connect diverse people with common values. Join groups that put you in contact with people with whom you might disagree. My wife and I are involved with Toastmasters, a public speaking training organization that helps you put your thoughts into words and your words into speeches that can move hearts. Write letters to the editor and opinion pieces for your local paper advocating for freedom to read. Attend rallies and protests and use your words on clever protest signs. It sounds like some of you are already all over this. Organize banned book events and displays at your local public library. And read banned books and support the work of diverse authors. I want to say a quick word about Amazon boycotts. I get it. Billionaires don't need more of our money. We want to do the right thing by supporting local businesses, for example, independent bookstores. I've learned a lot about publishing through my work at Golden Crown Literary Society. Although my work focuses on sapphic literature, the same publishing issues affect all underrepresented groups. Certainly, buy less from Amazon if you can get what you need locally. It might be less convenient, but it helps local businesses. However, boycotting literature that's available via Amazon ends up hurting authors. The Amazon publishing platform for ebooks, paper, and audio has democratized publishing and increased the reading audience exponentially. Authors, particularly those who are independently and self-published, have been able to build large reader bases and careers that were not possible before Amazon. So if you can get the books you want through another method, like buying directly from an author's website or a publisher, please do. However, many authors only have their books on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited. Even independent bookstores don't offer them. I encourage you to continue to buy books, especially independent and self-published works, from Kindle and Kindle Unlimited. Just a quick aside, if you read a lot on Kindle Unlimited, you end up taking more money from them because they have to pay per page to the author. This platform has no equal and makes it possible for authors to support their writing careers and to keep writing. Keep buying and reading books, even if you have to go to Amazon to get them. A word after a word after a word is power. Literature expands our understanding of ourselves and other people and can lead to greater empathy, including for ourselves. The power of seeing ourselves, our thoughts, our feelings, our lives, and our history on the page can provide openness to the perspective of other people, which deepens our connection to one another. We are in unprecedented times, at least for most of us who are alive today. Our access to literature, to truthful historical narratives, and to freedom of speech is under duress. It's up to us to push back on those who want to control what we can read, what we can learn, what we can write, and what we can say. Now is the time to exercise our freedom of speech by continuing to support authors who tell our stories and who expand our worldview. We must individually and collectively use our freedom of speech and expression to ensure we continue to have access to broad perspectives in literature, especially those works that challenge us to think critically about our nation and our communities. Now is the time to speak up. Show up at local community meetings and events. Advocate for your interests when they're under threat. Write letters to the editor and op-eds. Visible resistance works. Remember the stories I told you about the censorship of Dr. Vera Rubin's National Science Foundation biography and the removal of Harriet Tubman and African American people from the Underground Railroad webpage? I wrote that section of this speech just a few days ago. Both stories made it into the media and generated outrage and outcry. Both pages have now been restored to tell the truthful history. Visible resistance works. I was at the grocery store the other day and a small child was having a meltdown, frustrated over something. They were crying so hard that they couldn't say what was bothering them. I bet there's some parents who have been through this. Mom had no idea what had gotten them so worked up. So what did she say to her child? Use your words. Crying, stomping, and hyperventilating won't get you what you want. You have to use your words. You want people to understand you and your point of view? Use your words. Are your values represented in the policies that affect you and your community? Use your words. Do you see injustice in your community, in your city, or in your country? Use your words. Your words are your power. Whether you are writing a memoir, a novel, a truthful history, or a letter to the editor, tell your story, share your thoughts, claim your power. Thank you.
Wow.
Yes. Amen.
Thank you, Betsy. I wasn't expecting that. I expected it to be good. I don't know. We'll talk. Thank you again, though. We are running a little late, but I do want to know if anybody has a question for Betsy. I heard about what we should be doing, so now I have some ideas, but anybody have any questions or comments?
Yeah. I think it is essential that we use our words, but I think it is necessary but not sufficient. I think it is essential equally that we use our hearts, because when somebody speaks to us or we speak to someone else from our head, ain't nothing happens. We are centered in our hearts and our bellies, and if we come from there as well, then the energy of compassion is very powerful, rather than someone feels lectured or you know what I'm saying, I'm sure. So I think even when we speak to ourselves, our heads are not enough, we need our hearts.
Hi, Betsy, first, wonderful presentation. I think you can tell from the applause that we're definitely with you here. So to that end, we're thinking about putting something into our website and our platforms on what we support as an organization, and clearly what you're advocating aligns with that. And we want to make sure we have the correct words after words after words that we use in describing how we're aligned with you. Do you have standardized text that we could use to support this? And then my second question briefly on this is, do you feel like you might be one of the targets of, say, a Trump administration legal effort to go ahead and go after terrorist nonprofit organizations?
I do have text, which I'm happy to share. I think it's helpful, particularly for folks who couldn't be here or would like to read instead of have the visual and audio. So I'm happy to share that with you. Do I feel like GCLS is a target? You may have heard in my biography that I come from the Intel community. So I'm always thinking about where are the risks, where are the challenges that we're facing. And while we have not had any specific threats or challenges to us, I'm always wary that we could. We sort of fall under the radar for a lot of folks. We're not doing some of the high profile activities that some queer literary groups do, like Drag Queen Story Hour and things like that. So we haven't had anything like that, but every time we go into a new city, I meet with the police department to tell them that we're coming and make sure that we have the right security. I will tell you that our community is terrified. We have this international conference happening in Albany. We've had a number of cancellations of international attendees who are afraid to cross our border, which is a place that I never thought we would be as a nation. And it's heartbreaking to me that we're not going to have these folks with us. We're trying to sort of deal with things as they come, but so far we've not had a specific threat. It's just a concern.
So I was talking to a younger friend recently, and they said to me something along the lines of, well, I saw the movie, why would I bother reading the book? And I was unable to articulate what I thought was anything even close to an effective answer. And I was wondering what your answer to that might be.
That's a really interesting question. I love movies and television and all of that, but I think when you read a book, there is an interplay that happens between your brain and the brain of the person who put the words on the page, and a depth that you get to that you can't through a visual medium like a movie. In addition to it usually being pared down significantly, but you don't really get that first person perspective that you might in a book. I hope that helps.
Thanks for your talk, Betsy, and for these great questions. This is a softball question, but given your background, I just have to ask it. I think we weren't surprised, but we were shocked when the Naval Academy Library removed Maya Angelou, but left Mein Kampf. Your comments?
It's the purpose of these military academies is to build officers of character to lead diverse troops in times of war and conflict. And when we remove books that provide perspective to the people that are your comrades and your troops, you lose some of that character development. I mean, Mein Kampf should probably be there so that people understand what happened, as should Maya Angelou, so that people understand that when young people come into the military, they come with all kinds of backgrounds, and you've got to build a cohesive team that you lead using traditional American values in times of conflict.
During this time, I'm seeing a lot of propensity for people to self-censor for the sake of safety. How do you guide people through that you are with, to strengthen and embolden, to stand up, to be able to still use those words and use that voice, while also respecting people's needs to just be safe?
That's a really interesting question. And I think we do have to respect the intuition that people have for their own safety and recognize that their life experience and their environment may be very different. I live on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. My life as a queer person is very different from someone who's living in Kansas City, Missouri, for example. And I think where that puts me is everyone doesn't have to do everything all the time. And we trust that overall the community will create the art that needs to be created. We provide safety and support where we can. That's why community is so important. Coalitions, associations, social groups, that kind of thing. A big part of our conference in Albany, for example, is going to be talking about the power of our stories, creating those connections and support systems that people need, all while trying to figure out what do we do if things get worse? How will we act as a community? How will we retain our words as a community if there are greater bans and that kind of thing? But it really is about trusting one another to tell the stories and recognizing that people do have to listen to their own intuition around safety.
Thank you. Thank you again. Definitely looking forward to seeing you in Albany.